Right, welcome back to the second hour. It's about 5 minutes past the top of the hour. We have so many conversations to have tonight. And first off, we want to talk about the Law Society of Kenya. And today they took action. They say there's a lot of weed out there that they need to get out of the real practice. People purporting to be advocates and practicing and offering that service. And that's why the LSK president is here tonight. Eric Theory, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Ken.
You know, before I begin this, I remember in 2020, I was sort of a victim of the same thing. When I was accused of practicing law without a certificate. You know, it happened to me. And the lucky thing is the investigation shows that I'm a lawyer, right? And what I was offering is what everyone else would offer under the consultancy. But let's bring back the subject. What has occasioned your current move?
Ken, you know, the legal profession is a regulated profession. There is an act of parliament, actually 2 acts of parliament, that regulate how advocates are supposed to practice. And so we have witnessed an increase in cases where persons who are not qualified to practice law have been setting up law firms, some of them in towns, some of them in smaller towns that may escape scrutiny, and they are purporting to offer services as advocates. And to ensure that we are able to carry out our mandate as the Law Society in terms of regulation of the legal profession, in terms of maintaining professional standards within the practice of law, we had to initiate this countrywide crackdown on masqueraders so that we can, working together with the National Police Service, arrest and weed out, as you put it, these who are essentially criminal, people who are lowering and affecting the standards of practice of law in this country.
Okay, so in your investigations, what did you discover? That these are lawyers who are purporting to be advocates, or they're not even lawyers to begin with?
There's a big number that are not lawyers, that they have not undergone any formal training as a lawyer. Some of them have just been working closely with lawyers as either clerks or they are children of former advocates, and so they have had some sort of exposure with a law firm. So we're finding those cases. We also have cases of lawyers who have been trained in law, but for one reason or the other have not yet managed to be admitted. So either they have failed their exams or they have not cleared a school, maybe because of one reason or the other. And so they've set up law firms where they are purporting to practice.
How do they get audience in court? And the second thing is, our system is adversarial. How can they not be pointed out by the other side? How do they manage to sneak in and get audience? How does it happen?
I think the incidences have increased because of the virtual courts. That could be one. And secondly, sometimes they position their law firms either on the other side of town, Tomboya, or downside town, where they have a lot of walk-in clientele, or they move to smaller towns. For example, in Nairobi, then someone would go and open an office in Ruai, in Kayole, in places where they are likely not to operate, somehow below the radar.
Okay.
Some of them assume names of advocates. They masquerade in the name of existing advocates. So when you hear the name, and of course, we share a lot of similarities of names. So they get away.
Eric Theory in Kayole, for example.
Yes.
And no one knows if it's the real. At least you are lucky you are in the public. So what happens, Wakili, to people like my friend Cliff Umbeta, who have taken out practicing certificates for a while, and it happened that I took a case, and at that point, he had not renewed. Where do you place them?
No, those are cases of then that will be dealt with and under the Advocates Act as a case of professional misconduct. So the difference here is that the masquerader is actually engaging in a criminal activity. An advocate who has not taken out a practicing certificate is engaging in professional misconduct, for which then the society can take action and even require him to, and can be fined, or any other sentence can be meted upon him. Okay,
impersonation is a crime that has been there for a long time. Yes. So what happens after this? It's a small window of vigilance, and you're doing this with the police, then you go back and retreat as a society, or you plan to proceed with this?
No. Actually, it's not a short-term initiative. It's just the launch of a national-wide crackdown. But it is something we've actually set up a structure. We've set up an office within the Law Society that is going to coordinate these efforts, and it's going to be a continuous process. What we have witnessed is that if we do not follow up on these cases, and if we spot weld, what happens is that they go under the radar, and when things are quiet, they come back. And we will find, for example, there is a gentleman who is facing criminal charges at Makadara, and he has 2 cases, and he was recently spotted
again
in another court, in a virtual forum, in another court. And when he was smoked out and asked, by an advocate who was familiar with him, and asked him, "You are not an advocate.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?" And so he went underground. And that's the reason why we are doing this. So in those cases, we are actually now having an advocate appearing for the Law Society, following up on the criminal charges, and we are taking steps now to even urge the court not to release them on bond, because once they are released, then they go back to practice, to the same thing.
So is there lesser claims for lawyers who are practicing as advocate, and individuals who are just familiar with the practice and going to court, or is the same thing? The treatment is the same for both of them?
Well, the treatment is a bit different, because as I've indicated, if it's an advocate, unless the advocate has...
No, just a lawyer practicing as an advocate, a lawyer, and then an individual, just a random Kenyan practicing as an advocate.
Well, the treatment for them is the same. The only difference here is that for the lawyer, if he is in the process of getting admitted, at every admission ceremony, the Law Society is, as of right, required to give their comments as to whether that person is morally fit to be admitted. And so it means that any lawyer who practices a law and is caught faces the risk of not getting admitted, because then the society will place in an objection and say that this person is not fit to be admitted as an advocate on account of masquerading
as an advocate.
Interesting.
Yes. I have about a minute, so as I let you go, how do I spot as a Kenyan know this certified lawyer, is a lawyer who's taken out practice certificate, and as a result he's an advocate of the High Court, and he can represent me? Just in about 30 seconds.
We require members of the public to go to the Law Society portal. There's a search engine. You put in the name of the lawyer. It will indicate whether first he's an advocate, and secondly whether he is active. If he is active, he is licensed to practice. If he is inactive, then he is not licensed to practice, and you can alert the Law Society.
As simple as that.
About that.
If you do today the portal Ken Mijungu, you don't find him. That's not an advocate.
He's not an advocate.
Don't. If he's inactive, he should not go to court.
He should not go to court.
Can that be challenged if there's if the whole process goes on, and then eventually probably he wins the case and he was inactive at that time? What happens to the results of that case?
Chances are that cases can be overturned.
Okay.
Yeah, the courts have held that those documents that have been prepared by persons who are not qualified to practice law, to a certain extent, are invalid.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would depend on the circumstances, the documentation, but it creates a problem even in criminal cases where sometimes it is discovered that the cross-examination and the proceedings were conducted by a person who is not qualified to practice law. So the case might even start afresh.
And there's no double jeopardy in that case?
No. Because now this person was represented by a person who's not qualified.
Thank you so much, Eric Theory, for shedding light on that. So it's as simple as that. LSK portal, put the name of the advocate, and if it doesn't appear or appears as inactive, consider them not an advocate. Thank you so much, LSK President Eric Theory speaking to us tonight. As I let him go, and my panel of education experts join me in a bit, less than 30% of you Kenyans have